Which is one problem because there's light. And clouds and water. Well, that's a problem because that didn't happen until day 2. So it's really that is all we have, meaning. And now it's your turn. It's good timing to teach this one well. What questions do you have? We'll start with Genesis since I didn't ask. What questions have you come up with in Genesis? Yes.
When Noah had to fly into the lake.
Yes.
And then had trouble. But he goes and so there were holes in the story.
Yes. Go through what is looking for grace, because we need that grace. Interesting, because I read something in here that I never heard about before with that. The standard explanation, what chapter and verse is that?
9, chapter 9, 20, 21.
Yes. Okay.
22.
Okay. Yeah. So here's the thing. The standard translation is seeing nakedness is bad. You're supposed to cover up. But the fact that he went out there and said, "Hey guys, check it out. Dad's drunk. He's looking like a fool," and they were careful to go back. Now that's just modesty thing. Well, she'd wake up, find out. Well, that's hardly worth a curse. I think it could be that. It could be just that. The other thing that's a little more sensitive, which is you're never going to hear this in a children's Sunday school class. The Bible often uses euphemisms. It doesn't say genitals, it says feet. When Ruth slept at the feet of Boaz, she was under his skirt. Well, she's not that small. She was more than just the euphemism. She slept, so he wakes up and is like, "Oh, what do you want?" Like, but they say at the feet. So look at it from that perspective. The wording "saw his father naked," which can be translated to see nakedness. He saw the nakedness of his father. In the original Hebrew, Deuteronomy 22:30 uses the phrase similar to the new one we see here to prohibit the man from committing incest with his mother. If this is the scenario, it implies that Cain was born through his mother. So not just he, but they're drunk. And he comes in and he uncovers his father's nakedness. And he saw his father's nakedness, which means she was his nakedness. She saw him. So the boys are like, "Oh, this is bad. Let's go ahead and cover him up." He wakes up and he doesn't curse Ham. He curses Canaan, the son.
Yeah.
Because Canaan would be the illegitimate bastard son that he had from his mother. Speculation, pure speculation. It does answer the question, why was he that outraged about it? I mean,
I would apologize to my son for doing something so stupid.
well, there's no injunction against getting drunk.
And I don't know. It's not his fault.
I know we got the Victorian era in this, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I was drunk." Hey, dude, what are you doing walking into my tent? But it's an interesting thought. If that's the case, then it reflects that Canaan would be cursed because he's a bastard child and he's a child of incest. Otherwise, it's a speculations theory. We have that little bit. We don't know exactly what goes on. But I didn't just make that up. I came across this and someone had enough credibility to have it printed in a pretty decent Bible.
Well, I looked at it in my interpreted Bible, and there was an explanation that the writers of this book were laying the background for why Canaan was relegated to a lower status. So they explained why that happened.
Okay.
Later on in the life of Israel, they were subjected to.
But here's an important part between eisegesis and exegesis. are the writers writing this because they think Canaan's inferior, so they go back into the story and make a reason why he's inferior?
Right.
Or did he do this, was cursed to be inferior, and that explains later on why he's inferior? So we don't believe in eisegesis here. It's not right to read into a story. Does it say, well, the authors wrote this way so that they could explain why Canaan was cursed? The exegesis says this happened, and reading out of that, now we know why Canaan is cursed. The curse came to fruition. But it was also a very nice way for us to feel, as Jews, to feel superior to the Canaanites. They could look, this is where your origin, you guys came from this horrible thing.
So those are slaves.
Which it's, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something too, but it just seems like it makes more sense that it was just because he saw his dad naked. I mean, okay, that's bad, but to curse one of your three sons because of it, if there was something more to it, this makes more sense. And again, we're looking at ancient Hebrew, trying to translate cultures and customs to what it is to today. Seeing your father's nakedness would have included your wife.
Looking in the tent.
More than just, yeah.
What was he looking in the tent for?
Trouble, and he found it. That's, I'm glad you asked that, because I never saw that before. I didn't, until this translation brought that out, but it fits, because even Barbara said to me, why didn't he curse Ham? Why didn't he curse the son? The son had nothing to do with it. Well, he's the bastard child in this scenario, which, okay, you're not going to be an equal footing with the rest of the inheritance because you're a child of incest. Reuben did the same thing with with Jacob's mother. Tried to usurp authority, slept with his father's wife, and was cursed for it. Excellent lead-off question. Good. Anybody else?
I have another one unless
Okay.
someone else wants to go.
Carl.
The sons of God,
Yes.
the daughters of men.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good.
There are a lot of interpretations of that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it might have been earlier.
It comes up several times. Yes. The sons of God the sons of God began to call on
The
God.
daughters of men.
And the sons of God looked on the daughters of men and saw they were
Pleasing.
pleasing and took them. So who are the sons of God?
Right.
Well,
And
one
he-
interpretation says they were like angels
Yes. And
walking on the earth, giants.
well, the Nephilim are something different. The Nephilim, in close reading, it says there were these going on, and there were Nephilim, which was the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of
All right.
women. You were going to say something, Barbara? Oh, okay. No.
She asked me what chapter and verse is that?
Oh, good point. Yeah.
I mean, is it when
Cindy, what chapter and verse?
Cain and Abel are getting wives?
It's after, that's one thing. Okay, well, here's some examples. When Cain is cast out, he says, anybody finds me who's going to kill me? Oh, you have Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. Who's there to kill you?
Right.
And where did he get his wife?
Yes.
And he built a city. You need people to build a city. Where are these people coming from all of a sudden? One explanation, the standard Orthodox explanation, which I don't like, but there is. Adam and Eve lived hundreds and hundreds of years. So we mentioned Cain and Abel, but there were children, there were other children. These children weren't important to the story, so they weren't brought into the story. There might have been Bill, Bob, Jerry, and all those, but they didn't have anything to do with the story, which means they're also daughters. So out of necessity, they would have had to marry their sisters and then their cousins and nieces and all that other stuff going on as they procreate. But it still doesn't get the idea of the sons of God and daughters of men. They were all, if that's the case, it would have all been sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. So you don't have that distinction. The idea that they were angelic beings. Jesus is challenged by the Sadducees who did not believe in afterlife. Remember the story about the woman who was married to 7 different brothers? By Levitical law,
Yeah.
brother dies, you have to marry the next. Married all of them, had no children. Whose wife will she be in heaven? Remember the answer Jesus gave? You don't know anything about scripture. First of all, there'll be like angels in heaven, neither given nor taken in marriage. The idea that the angels are celibate, they don't have sexual relations. So the idea that they were angels, that doesn't quite work because they wouldn't have. If they were God's angels, they never would have presumptuous enough to be able to take on the appearance of people and have sex. If they were Satan's angels, they'd be demons, and I can't imagine God just letting demons run wild. So that it's either angels or demons if they're heavenly beings. So that doesn't quite fit either. So who's going to kill him? And there is another section where wickedness and 6:1 is the part where human beings began to increase in numbers on earth, and daughters are born to them. Human beings began to increase. The sons of God, so the daughters of humans were beautiful. They married them as they chose. And then verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards. We're talking after the flood. When the sons of God went into the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. So what other options are there? Anybody else come up with another option? If they're not the angels, because they're God's angels obey God, they would never do this. It would have to be demons as sons of God. In the ancient world, they would believe a king would say, I'm a son of God, basically claiming that God has blessed him and has adopted him as a son. But their children weren't necessarily called sons of God. It was just that person claimed that title. So that didn't. Any other ideas? I'm happy to say I'm not alone on this either. There's another famous author, I can't think of his name right now, but he wrote a whole section on this. So normally we think of Genesis 1 as an overview creation of the whole world. And then Genesis 2 is a very specific detail about that. What if Adam and Eve were the special God-breathed sons of God? God breathed into Adam, and Eve came out of Adam, and that was the sons of God through Adam. What if Genesis 1 was human beings?
Right.
That God created human beings, and they were on the face of the earth, and they were growing and multiplying. And then God made the garden. In the ancient world too, again, the king would build his palace, and he'd build a special garden off the palace. We're not talking corn, lemon beans here. We're talking fancy trees and peacocks, beautiful stuff. So in his garden, he creates Adam and Eve to be his special chosen people, makes them his progeny, his offspring, and blesses them until they sin, and then they're thrown out of Eden and they're back in the world where other human beings are. Now you have a reason to believe that there are sons of God coming from Adam and Eve, marrying the daughters of humans. That's not the Orthodox thing, and I couldn't write up in my paper on theology when I was ordained. I couldn't put that in there, but it's the one that makes sense to me. And then when you have that, all these other things make sense. The sons of God, Adam's offspring, so the daughters of humans, regular people. And if you're concerned about that for today, remember the ark? Noah was an offspring of Adam and Eve. Anybody that wasn't is dead.
Yeah.
So after Noah, everybody is an offspring from Adam and Eve. If in fact there were humans that weren't God-breathed.
Unless the water that covered the earth was only whatever they could see. And there was another part of the earth that wasn't covered by water.
But there again, you're saying the Bible didn't happen. Scripture says it covered the entire planet.
Yeah.
And theology, again, we're not writing history, we're writing theology. In the first creation, water covered the face of the earth. God receded the water, land appeared. In this creation, water covers the earth. And he starts over. The water recedes, land appears. He starts fresh with Noah. So that follows theologically if it didn't really cover the whole earth, like there's another creation. There's other ancient histories that have flood stories, but they don't really think it was that. They think it was just a big flood in the area. It's either believe that it did cover the whole earth, or if it didn't, then you open a very slippery slope to what don't you believe in the Bible?
He actually even said he was gonna wipe out everything except what was on the boat.
Right.
There was nothing left.
What about the fish?
Well, I got a feeling they made it.
Put them in the ark, because it's already gonna be in the water. Yeah.
So
I
they
wondered
were,
About that one too.
Fish made it,
I didn't
sure.
need to worry about fish.
Yeah.
Yes.
The humans hadn't contaminated fish. They contaminated everything they touch. Everything was,
That was it.
yeah, little fish bowl.
A little fish bowl
Yeah.
from the
They all came from that.
So
aquarium.
again, if you're trying to find a geological explanation for things happening here, Moses wasn't writing that. He's writing theology. God created everything. He destroyed everything, he started fresh. And the idea of covering the whole earth goes back to the creation story. So, you know, I come across that people, and the age, people, how old people got it. Is that really, were they using the same time we were using? Hey, the planet went around the sun. A year was a year. It wasn't like any, like, oh, 5 years for one of ours. No.
Because
It was,
the Bible, it clearly says later on that the time was now limited to 120.
which could mean that it was 120 years until God sent the flood. So the time was limited to 120, or that the life of man goes down to 120. And if you'll notice, after Noah, you know, the descendants after that, they lived shorter and shorter and shorter periods until, yeah. So, but here's the thing. I talk to people and say, well, you don't really think all the animals are all, that didn't really happen, did you? Did it? So you're a Christian? Yeah. Do you believe in the resurrection? Yeah. Do you believe in a virgin birth? Yeah. Do you believe God brought Lazarus back to life after 4 days? Yeah. Then what's the problem?
Yeah, why couldn't you put all that out?
If you can believe that God created everything out of nothing, and that water covered the earth once, why couldn't it cover the earth a second time? So if you deny that, then you have to deny the creation story. There never was water over the whole earth. To figure out where it went. I don't know. I believe the Bible. I think there's stuff in there I don't understand. I can't explain it with my geology scientific background, but I believe it. And I also know that we should be focusing more on the theology behind it rather than the archaeological, geographic history part of it. So accept it on faith and see where it takes you. I guess is the best thing. But I do believe, yeah. Did God create the world in 7 24-hour days? First off, I don't care. Second, I don't think it did. I think days is the word yom in Hebrew means a day, like an era, in the day of David. In our day, in David's day, which day? Tuesday afternoon? No, it's an era. Could he have done it in 7 days? Could have done it in 7 minutes if he wanted to. He's God. But there's nothing. It's curious too that no one in the ancient world, even root scripture, ever thought it was really a 7-day period until the fundamentalist era in the 1920s or whatever. It was a reaction to liberalism, and they took the Bible literally, and they started pounding the idea of 7 24-hour days. That's a relatively new idea. Yeah, we accept, like, oh, people thought of it forever. No, it's not. What other questions you have?
I was reading in chapter 10 and it's saying that Noah's family split up and moved all over the earth, and
Yes.
created different kingdoms and stuff, and all spoke different languages. Then chapter 11 comes around and says, at this time, the whole world spoke the same language. So, like,
Yeah. So they're going over you. This is what happens. Now, let me tell you what happened. So from those 3 sons, they spread out, going north. Japheth, I think, went north, and Shem went west, and Ham went south, which is Canaan, Egypt, and all that. And eventually, that's where all the different languages they have. They didn't start out that way. Now 11 zones in. Again, it's like that flyover. We left the previous story of Noah and those details of Noah. Then chapter 10 is the table of nations. We go back up in the air again. We kind of fly over generations, and these became that person, and it became all that stuff. Now, chapter 11, we're touching down again have a specific detail about the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, right.
How did we get all these different languages? Well, let me explain that to you. When God said to Moses, I want you to write this treaty, one of the details was the significant history between the suzerain and the vassal. So out of all the lore, all the oral history that they have, Moses has to be an editor. Moses has to leave out a whole bunch of sections of stuff and decide, what am I going to include here that's important for everybody to know about our relationship? So it's important to know how we got here. God created everything. There wasn't a whole bunch of gods fighting it out. It was him. Then how did we get to this place? Oh, that was sin. And then is that, well, there's recreation, the second world, which is the flood. Scripture tells us there'll be a third one, which is fire. The promise of God said, not flood again. I'm not going to do that again. Then there's all the different languages. Maybe I better include this story. I better include the Tower of Babel. So he details that one. Then you'll notice after the Tower of Babel, you go through generations until you get chapter 12. Hired Abraham. So again, if it's a flyover, touchdown for this particular detail, we're back up to the air again. I hope that explains you're thinking linear.
I am.
Nowadays, we go, well, this, and that should have happened before that, but here's a block. Okay, here's another story that explains this detail.
Yeah,
We'll go back up in the air again and cover whole generations.
that makes sense.
Then we land on Abraham. Okay.
Okay.
The idea of Babel is reaching to the heavens. Everybody, I say everybody, I always mean ancient Near East world. I don't know what the Alaskans were thinking, whatever. But everybody knew that the higher you get to heaven, the closer you are to God. So there's sacred spaces were on the high mountaintops and stuff. It's interesting because Jerusalem is a lower mountain surrounded by higher mountains. God said, no, here's my place. Forget the height thing. But back then, they went to the high places. So the plains of Shinar, they didn't have it. So they brick and mortar, they're going to build themselves a ziggurat, if you know the word for that. They're going to build a tower to reach the heavens, which is important because, again, it's a second sin. The first time people tried to be like God, to communicate with God, was with what? Adam and Eve. The second time was here. If they could reach the heavens, they could get up into heaven. They could be equal to God. They could be up there with God. That's people on the wrong foot again.
Yeah.
That was the second attempt to be like God. I made all these notes here. And I look for them. I can't find them. Yeah. But that was the tower. Yeah. So that's the detail for the tower. And that is only 8 verses. And we try to read a whole lot into that. It's only 8 verses long. And this is the account of Shem's family 2 years after that. And he goes all through that. And then gets down to verse 26 in chapter 11. After Nahor had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And this accounts of Terah's family. Now we're getting ready to move into some detail. Good. Good questions. Good. Thank you. Anybody? Yes.
Genesis 3:15. It's between the serpent and the woman when God is cursing them. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. This next 2 lines, what messed me up, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. What's that mean?
Basically, the threat of a snake to us is bites us in the ankle with the heel. And we see a snake, we crush its head.
Crush his head. I thought maybe it meant something later on in the Bible.
Well, it is. It goes all the way up through to God, the offspring, women's offspring is all humans, which eventually Jesus crushed the head of Satan. And in the imagery, you see Satan being hurled down. And I don't want to go too far into that. It's basically this: people hate snakes. There's always this, and you have to be actually think about the hard rock stuff back in the 70s. The whole idea of having snakes showed your affinity to Satan. And the idea that the snake was, Satan inhabited the snake, which raises, I don't go too far afield. So there's this hatred between God's people and the serpent. Also, the serpent was considered to be wise and often associated with gods because snakes don't blink. I mean, I don't know if they really do, but theoretically, the idea is that snakes don't blink. So they're always watching. Like some evil thing that's always got its eyes open all the time. Well, that has to be satanic. That has to be supernatural. It doesn't blink. So they associated that with them. Special powers. When they were bitten in the wilderness, God told Moses, make a pole and 2 snakes on it. And that's going to be that's the symbol for medicine today, is the snakes. I can't think of the term for it now.
Unless you live in West Virginia,
Yeah. Okay.
and then handling snakes is good.
Well,
That drove me crazy.
yeah. That's the best answer I can give you with that. Go into much more detail. It's pretty much what it says. There's a hatred between the two. They're going to crush you, and you're going to try to. All you can do is bite their heel. They can kill you, but there's going to be that hatred.
And between your offspring
All
and
of
hers.
Eve's offspring of us, and Satan, he's the snake, the serpent, Satan.
Kind of a perpetual conflict,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never going away.
ongoing.
Right.
It never truly ends.
And just. That's where I say,
Well, yeah, but it takes a few pages.
yeah. Cursed are you, O livestock. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. People say, well, that apparently the snake had legs before that. No, that's not what it meant. The idea of crawling on your belly is supplication. If you're bowing before someone, you're eating dust, the dust of my feet. You're just low. You're low. Again, it's theological more than anatomical biology. But you don't have to take it literally from verse 14, that up until that point, the snake had legs and like a chameleon, and all of a sudden, oh, now I got to crawl on my belly. It's a theological point, not an anatomical point.
The style changes there too, from narrative to that indented difference. It's not poetic, but it's not, just, at least in this translation I have.
Okay, let me read this good. Let me read this one too. I didn't read it before. Humiliation. God does not engage in a back and forth dialogue with the serpent. The other one, Adam and Eve, what'd you do this? What happened? You don't do that with good. He simply curses it to a life of humiliation where it will literally bite the dust. But God promises that the woman who was deceived first will become the means by which the serpent and his strategy will be defeated. They're going to crush his head. The woman will eventually be the one who prevails, and he'll be eternally humiliated with the dust crawling your belly. Sign of humiliation. Anybody else? We have a New Testament stuff too. We're up to chapter 7, I think. 5 verse 26. We can stay in the old, but I don't want to let the whole time go by and not discuss the New Testament either. While you're looking for that, let me say something else. And again, it's very important. If I don't give you the clues ahead of time, I start Genesis and it says, in the beginning. My question is, in the beginning of what? People generally say the beginning of everything. This is how everything started, in the beginning of everything. I just went on for 10 or 15 minutes about the suzerain-vassal treaty. And the whole point of writing the history was the relationship between the suzerain and the vassal. So now, if I ask you, in the beginning of what should be your answer?
Relationship with God.
Right. It's not the beginning of everything. It doesn't talk about dinosaurs, tectonic shifts and plates. It doesn't. When we begin our story, the earth already exists. Water already exists. And darkness already exists. In the beginning, and then God said, and each one of those sections, again, is for the ear. And God said, let there be light. And God said, let the waters separate. And God said, let the waters, and God said, let there be lights and all that. So in the beginning, you have the earth, water, and darkness. He created light the first day. He didn't create darkness, it was already there. The second day, he didn't create water, he separated it. It was already there. All he did was separate it. And that is what we call the heavens. Earth was down here. The heavens were up there where the birds fly. He created the heavens and the earth as we know it. The third day, the water receded, didn't create anything there. He exposed the dry land. So in the beginning of the relationship, and this is not biblical, and he didn't write this because it doesn't matter for theology, could there have been a previous existence on earth involving the dinosaurs and all that stuff? And they got wiped out by a meteor shower. And then darkness covered the face of the earth after the implosions and volcanic and all that. Sure. Are you going to preach it? No, because it's not biblical. It doesn't matter. But again, it's not a history book. It's a theology book. There could have been 10 generations of earth prior to our story. We pick it up here. This is the relationship between Yahweh and our people. In the beginning, it started like this. This is what was there. And this is what God did. I think that's fascinating.
Okay. Right. At the very end of 15,
Now we're in Genesis, or where are we at?
Genesis, Abram, God asked him to sacrifice the animals.
Yeah. Oh,
Was that just traditional? I mean, because I know Jews sacrifice, I know the whole thing with, what they can eat and what they couldn't eat, but was that just what they did?
this covenant deal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of speculation. Again, there's so many gaps we don't know, but
Yeah.
there were deals, and the theory is, and this I believe has some archaeological background to it, that when two people made a deal with each other, again, a treaty, they would have these oaths. And sometimes part of that meant cutting an animal in half and walking between them. Basically saying, if I violate this treaty, may the gods do as much to me as this. It's a very visual sign of what's happening. So yeah, they would have sacrificed or something like that, all right? But the important thing about this one is, when does Abraham walk through it? He doesn't. God knows Abraham couldn't keep it. He puts himself to that. He walks through with the blaze and the fire and the torch. He commits himself to this covenant, but he doesn't make Abraham walk through it, which would have been normal for two people. Both of us would have put ourselves under this blessing or curse.
He was just taking the human tradition and putting himself into it.
Yes,
Okay.
he sealed it, but also as part of the mercy, he didn't make Abraham go through that. He knew he'd fail. And then he'd have to invoke the curse. So God swore by himself that he would be true to that. Yeah. And again, this was a vision that he had. It's hard to tell where he went into this dream and was it actually a vision that this happened, or did he literally cut the animals apart? And the fact that the birds came, verse 10, Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut. Oh no, birds of prey came down on the carcass. Abram drove them away. Okay, then he fell into a deep sleep. So did he dream this covenant thing happened? Theologically, it doesn't matter. God committed himself to this. But yes, they would have sacrificed animals, and there was the idea of bloodletting had to happen. Which, by the way, we'll get to this maybe later on, but when they placed their hand on an animal and it was slaughtered as a sin offering, the person who committed the sin would slit the throat. It wasn't the priest. Basically what they're saying is, for what I did to God, I deserve this. But God allowed me to have this substitute. You're going to do it instead of me. But I deserve what's going to happen to you. Placing the hand on the head. Then the priest would do the rest. But yeah, bloodletting was very common in all the ancient Near East rituals.
One more simple question.
Huh?
So there's a lot of biblical names that have gone to today. Cain and Abel. I know people that named their kids
Yeah.
Nimrod. Yeah, I mean, he was the hunter, he was the soldier, and that does not mean that today.
Chapter
It
10,
means
8.
idiot, stupid.
I know.
And I'm trying to figure out, did he do something later that brought that name, almost like Doubting Thomas?
That's a good question. They're wondering that much.
I'm reading this, I'm like, wait a minute, I heard
That's the-
Nimrod,
That
and
was
that
one of
was,
the names they could pronounce.
Well,
maybe that was it.
January 4th, 10, verse 8, Nimrod? I realized, all right, I'll be asked that, what is Nimrod, what is that
I
deal?
can pronounce that.
Yeah.
I mean, you think, hey, way to go, Nimrod, you're like, wow, you're powerful, you're a warrior, that's really
Never
good
used
stuff.
that word in that way.
Yeah, no, I never would have either, Nimrod, yeah.
It just kind of jumped out.
No, the idea that, what I could read on that was, I don't know how it really got that way now, but Nimrod was a mighty hunter, was a builder of cities, which could have meant his power and everything relied on his ability to manipulate things and rely on himself, which is stupid, which is a fool's game
Okay.
as a Christian. It could have been. I've not been able to find anything where it says, okay, nowadays we call it this.
Yeah.
This story here, and being Nimrod was the great hunter and builder.
I thought maybe he did something later though.
No, there's nothing we
I'm
have.
not sure it's even mentioned later, is it?
Yeah, I don't remember.
But following on that line, when you look it up, some of the names in some of the big way out science fiction stuff or, oh, I can't think of the series right now. They're biblical names,
Like Star Wars and
Yeah.
some of that kind of stuff.
but you know, you listen and you think, well, that's a far out name. Harry Potter stuff. It's biblical.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, that's a cool name. Wait a minute, it came from here.
There's one thing, and this, it's a general overview in the Old Testament. Basically, people who are closer to God generally are living in the country. They're the nomads, they're traveling. Evil is associated with the city. So the more people accumulate together, congregate together, evil abounds. So just a general metaphor, in the old world, if someone is from the city, is like, oh, okay, be careful. If they're in the country, it's like, okay, I can open up to you.
Country mouse, city mouse.
Yeah. So there again, the idea that Nimrod was the builder of cities. Why were they building cities? They had the entire world to live in. It's all of God's nature to live in. Why would they want to gather together and keep themselves secure, elevating one person above the other, building that whole structure, which is a dumb thing to do in God's eyes, Nimrod. Relying on your hunting abilities, Nimrod, I'm gonna provide for you, I gotta take care of you. There's plenty of plants to eat, you kill an animal eventually, but you don't have to live on protein and meat and, you know, that's the best guess, because I didn't know too, I was like, oh, okay, there it is again. I'm trying to read this like I didn't have the theology, like I'm reading it for the second time, like, well, that really sticks out, why would that? And I laughed, he was like, yeah, but I did not take the time to look up Nimrod and how it changed
Sure.
from there to the new. Anyone, anybody else?
I thought it was different the way when Noah's boat finally hit dry land, he right away sacrificed the bird. After all that time trying to save the animals and you're just on that boat and they're already getting rid of one. I mean,
The birds must have been fruitful and multiplied while they were.
that's what I'm
making
thinking
it.
too. That's why I wanted to figure it out. But wait a minute, you just
Yeah.
started here.
I think he was tired of being a baby.
Let's raise some chickens here.
Time
You
he's
know,
a baby.
a couple eggs.
Okay, see, here's the problem, because you're thinking about chapter 6, verse 20. Okay, go there. Two of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you. Everything is food. Now, go down to 7, verse 2.
Hairs.
7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, male and female. Also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female. What happens quite often when scripture repeats itself, initially it lays it out. If it repeats itself again, it gives more detail. So our children's story goes 2 by 2, 2 of every animal, as it went in there. Scripture says 7 pairs of every clean animal, 1 pair of every unclean. So they would have had something to sacrifice
Oh, okay.
after, and they're basically on the water for a year.
Yeah.
Now, how did they make it that long? You know, again, act on faith. But I saw one depiction, one commentator said, what if the elephants were babies? We're seeing the Noah story from down in Lancaster and these huge animals, and where's the baby giraffes? 2 baby giraffes,
Yeah, what if they were all
2 baby
young?
elephants,
I mean, because you
2
wouldn't
baby
want,
tiger cubs.
you wouldn't want 2 big tigers.
You wouldn't, why even?
Not for that long.
No.
One thing I
Maybe
appreciate
COVID.
too, I think I saw this from the Lancaster show. When the animals went into their cage, they fell asleep, went into hibernation.
Oh, really? So there's less waste, I guess.
You wouldn't have the waste, they wouldn't have the hunger, God would supernaturally keep them alive in stasis.
Okay.
In the dark.
Am I gonna preach that? Absolutely not, because I can't prove it.
Mm,
But you say, oh, this no, it could never happen, never happen. Yeah, what if they were babies? What if they went to sleep when they got in there?
3 football fields long.
Yeah,
But
3
still.
stories high.
be careful that we don't get too hung up on the historiography, archaeology of it, construction of it, geometrics. This is God destroyed the earth, saved the animals.
I
this
was
time.
always thinking, who's in charge of dung in that darn boat?
Yeah.
and stuff.
That's why the sun came along.
You understand why the youngest son hated everybody so much? Yeah, yeah, but this, you know, the thing, and the beautiful thing of it,
Save the snakes.
see, why save the snakes?
But that would have been in time to get rid of them.
Yeah.
See, they survived the
And
spiders
mosquitoes.
and the mosquitoes. I mean, what kind of
Mosquitoes, yeah.
mosquitoes?
Remember, the only things,
What are the bats gonna eat?
the only things that died were the
Exactly.
breeding things.
The breathing things, right? All the fish lived, but and all the insects, everything else that walked the earth, that crawled in the earth, were drowned. But yeah, if they can't hold their breath for a year or float on water or in water, they were dead. Yeah. Theology, I lost the thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Good questions. Good. Keep that up. I love this. It also stimulates me. Make the same promise I did when I did Bible studies in the prisons. I'd have my stuff ready, but it was a week to week until we'd meet. And they're in there reading because they're whatever, they're bored, they're reading the Bible. So we always started out with, if you have a question, we'll cover your questions first, then I'll get to my Bible study. And here's the point. If I don't have a good answer for you, I'll find one till next week. You know, they say one of the hardest things for a preacher to say those 3 little words, I don't know. Something that I don't know. I can tell you this is the theory, like the drunk. Why curse the child when yet there's a theory behind it? Like, that makes sense. I can understand that. The ark, I can understand some of those things. If you come up with questions that I don't have any kind of background for, I'll write it down and I'll try to get you an answer by next week. It may not be the correct answer, but it's some other thoughts about it that would help the answer.
There were 2 sons that one was a cattle farmer, one farmed the earth. Why did God not like the one that farmed the earth?
Yeah, the understanding is, first off, Abel gave the best, the first back to God. There's always understanding. You don't give anything inferior to God, always the best.
Right.
Cain just brought produce from the land. Could have been anything. Whatever it was, God didn't appreciate that.
Could that have been his best crops?
It may not have been his best crops. It may not have been offered with the right attitude. Okay, it's Sunday, I gotta put something in the offering plate here.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, God's real thrilled with you. Thanks for the $5. I really needed that, you know.
So it was just because he just didn't give his best.
Yeah, it wasn't because it was animals or crops. It was clear that Abel gave the best, the first, which is always supposed to be the best. And then Cain just gave some.
I have a question. You have so much genealogy in Genesis.
Mhm.
Is that why Matthew was picked to be the first book of the New Testament?
No, actually, people thought Matthew wrote first back in there when they were putting things together. Nowadays, we think Mark was the first one to write. And if we ever get a chance to do a synoptic study, the synoptic Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you'll see that Mark in 16 chapters basically lays out the preaching of Peter. Matthew takes Mark's work and says, well, I'm going to write to the Jews. So I'm going to take his work, I'm going to add all this Jewish history to it. And then Luke says, oh, I like that too. I'm going to take Mark's work and I'm going to add for Gentiles, leave out a lot of the biblical stuff and take some of Mark's stuff too. So you see the parallels of who's got words exactly the same and how they change things. But they didn't do that comparative study back when they were putting the books together for the New Testament. It was their thinking that Matthew was the first one to write, and then Mark wrote second, and Luke wrote. So he got in there first because it was misunderstanding. It's also a good segue, though, between the Old Testament and New. Because Matthew, because he's writing to Jews, how many times he says, this was happened to fulfill what wrote in the Old Testament. He really links the Old Testament together.
He jumps ahead pretty quick.
There's sections, it's interesting. Mark does stuff where he's just like blows past stuff, doesn't include a whole lot of stuff. Then he gives great detail about a story, which is good sermon stuff. You paint the picture. And we think Mark was writing Peter's sermons. Matthew was
Yeah,
trying
he
to,
went from like 2 years old, Jesus was 2, and all of a sudden he's
well, see,
growing.
the thing is, in the Jewish history, they didn't really much care about that history stuff.
Yeah.
Christians did not, I hope this doesn't spoil alert for anybody. It's time, I keep looking at that clock, and it's wrong.
Yeah.
We're past the time. If you're on the internet, I'm gonna let you go. I have something else I want to say with the group here. We're not gonna go any deeper in the study. So you're not gonna miss anything if you have to go. But it's gonna tell them that for the early Christians, we didn't celebrate Christmas at all for the first 300 years. Not a thing. Now, in the history here, when you wrote a history of somebody, you would include really important aspects of the childhood, but you wouldn't write about the whole childhood. You would again touch base. This was a sign that this person was blessed by God. If you're writing about Caesar or any great battle general, these marks, when he was born, he had a certain star in the sky. They did this with Anthony, the Greek, Alexander the Great. Prophecy said they saw his star rising and they predicted the doom of the Eastern countries. So they put touch base things. So Matthew threw in a few pieces just to make it more human, but no one was ever interested in a life history of Jesus up until he began his work. That's where Mark starts with, his beginning starts with the baptism and on from there. Matter of fact, John says nothing about his childhood. Everything we know about this whole thing is from Matthew and Luke. If it was really important to the early people, you think they'd have had more on it. But that's, yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.